Hello everybody, welcome back to yet another Rambling Reaction Review. I just want to say before we move on, yes, I am skipping the last World of Remnant. I was indisposed when it came out and didn't have enough time to get to it, so we will be skipping ahead for now. I will be merging that with the other World of Remnants that come up. I'm gonna put them all together, unless a really cool one like the Maiden one last volume pops up and catches my eye. But for now, let's discuss RWBY Volume 4, Episode 4, Family. Scene 1, The Farm. We start with the end of the farmer's day. He puts his pitchfork down, he's tired. He looks confusingly into a nearby mirror, inquisitively saying, "Hello?" And shockingly enough, he gets a response.
Hello, I'm Professor Ozpin.
He's alive, ladies and gentlemen! Well, in one sense of the term, at least. What do I mean by that? Well, where's his body? Where is he physically? We heard a voice. So, we know from last episode that Cinder said that she killed Ozpin. So maybe, just maybe, let's not assume that she's lying. She actually thinks she killed Ozpin. I have two theories that stem from that I'm kind of leaning towards the latter on, but I'm gonna give you both just in case until we get more information. Theory 1, the less likely one, during the big beam battle, where my Kamehameha going, ha! Between Cinder and Ozpin, there's a lot of explosions going on. Maybe Cinder didn't see after one of the big ones, he escapes into a pocket dimension that maybe only he can access through his powers. Maybe a time pocket, or maybe through mirrors, think like Mirror Master from The Flash. So Cinder then can't find Ozpin after a big blast, and she just assumes that she vaporized him. And thus, we have Ozpin talking to the farmer through the mirror. A little less likely. I think my second theory is a bit more plausible. Cinder did kill Ozpin, incinerated him the same way she did Pyrrha. But it is also one of my theories that Ozpin is probably immortal, or at least kind of like the Dunedain of long life. But either way, Ozpin has been around for a long time. It's been hinted so much that he has been. And right here, right now, might just show us how he's been around for so long. Imagine, if you will, Ozpin's body is mortal, but his spirit is immortal. And it body hops when the last one has been killed or used up to continue the wizard's work. But why the farmer? Firstly, my tinfoil hat theory of him being Ozma or a maiden in disguise is out, especially him being the Spring Maiden. I'll get to that a bit more later. After his shock, the farmer falls, and a woman's voice yells out,
"Oscar, you be careful with those tools."
So here, right now, we find out that his name is Oscar. And later in the credits, we find out that that was his aunt yelling at him. But what does the farmer's name being Oscar have to do with Ozpin's immortality? Well, in the Wizard of Oz, the wizard's real name is actually Oscar Zoroaster Frederick Isaac Norman Henkel Emmanuel Ambrose Diggs, or Ozpin Head for short. The farmer and Ozpin share the first name as Oz from Wizard of Oz. On top of that, the farm. Well, maybe not just the farm, but everything around the farm. It's basically Kansas, American heartland farm country, where Oz and Dorothy both were originally from in the Wizard of Oz. This all leads me to believe that Oscar is possibly a descendant of the original wizard back from when the four maidens got their powers, and thus is one of the only suitable hosts for the Ozpin spirit to inhabit. Now, how this transfer works is still a mystery, but I would guess that Oscar has to agree to it, sort of like a supernatural the show sort of possession thing. I know demons just take over the bodies, but angels, you have to say yes. Secondly, Ozpin probably just wouldn't take over Oscar completely. Like, he wouldn't just replace Oscar, but probably it would be more of all of his knowledge and memories and powers being transferred into Oscar, becoming a new person combined. Or it could be something more menacing, like the Reaper's indoctrination from Mass Effect. Oh wait, scratch that. That's my theory on Salem, but that's for another day. A quick production note. That was actually probably there last time we were at the farm, but I noticed it much more visibly here this time. There are red handprints on the sink when Oscar goes to look into the mirror. This is not really important story-wise, but it's just a tiny detail that I really liked. It kind of adds the realism that this is a barn that is actually in use, and it's probably been there for many, many years. It's not just like, oh, here's a Unity asset, let's slap it in, put it all together. It's a nice attention to detail that further shows that this is a world being lived and worked in. Whether or not that is blood or paint from the farm, well, hey, come on, like, it was just Thanksgiving. Turkey gotta come from somewhere. But either way, moving on, it was just a very nice sort of detail for the sink to have to make it more used looking. Scene 2. The Nightmare. Yang is having one hell of a nightmare, and this scene freaked me out. Not just because it looks creepy, but I had my goddamn headphones on when I watched this the first time, cranked for the previous scene to make sure that was Ozpin's voice. So when we got to this scene, I got an earful of the hellish background screaming. It was like basically vocalized fear and anxiety to me. And the red glow on like the rubble of Beacon, just exanting. Then the glow emanating from Adam makes him so evil looking, so much more than before, making him almost more larger than life than he really is. And my favorite shot out of all of this, when Adam appears for the first time, there is another Dolly Zoom, just like the one I mentioned back in Volume 3, Episode 11 with Weiss, but this one is much more subtle. It really simulates the idea that we are seeing this from Yang's point of view, and the Dolly Zoom is her eyes going wide from noticing Adam is right in front of her. For anyone confused what a Dolly Zoom is, I'll put a link in an annotation in the description below about when I explained it before. Again, very slightly, they are using those parallel lines for that one-point perspective that I talked about back in the Schnee Estate in episode 2 of this volume. Although this time, this one is much more of a contender to be like The Exorcist 3 with a bloody screaming in the background. Story-wise, this is all stemming from the mental trauma that Yang had suffered at the hands of Adam Taurus. Sorry, no pun intended. Heightened nightmares, the kind to wake you up with a cold sweat, more so than normal nightmares, are known to be experienced by 52% of combat veterans in real life suffering from PTSD. These are a level of heightened nightmares that only 3% of the regular population experiences. Again, I love how Freudian this is. I know I've mentioned this guy quite a few times already, but just like I was talking about at the Schnee Estate, I really just love how they are taking the time to focus on Yang's unconscious mind and how even her unconscious feels that she was powerless to defend herself. In the end, she wakes up with a start, and that leads us to Scene 3, the Xiao Long kitchen. Yang, now awake, hearing laughter, goes downstairs to investigate, and we get our first appearance of Professor Port and Oobleck. I gotta say, I actually wasn't expecting to see any of the teachers this volume, if not even at all, maybe aside from Glenda. They are actually not that serious here. They're having a lighthearted conversation while drinking water. Yeah. And this is just coffee. The whole scene is great. It actually has the most ups and downs of any scene yet. Even a fight scene. From Tai Yang telling the hilarious story of how he convinced Qrow that a skirt was part of his school uniform, to the father-daughter argument about her basically being treated like an adult, to WTF Tai Yang, why the hell would you say something like that to your traumatized daughter? And here, where I take a pause, much like Oobleck and Port, my reaction was very much the same. Till it became clear that this type of conversation is something that is well within Yang's comfort zone, and her father knows this. This is something that people do in real life to kind of judge other people's emotional states sometimes. I don't have a technical name for it, but it's only used by people that know each other pretty well. No technical name. The only way I can kind of explain it is kind of bouncing a ball up against somebody's emotional wall. If the ball bounces back, the wall is strong enough for that person to talk or even joke about whatever is bothering them for their emotional state. If not, if that ball does not bounce back, then you know that subject is taboo for a while until that person can sort themselves out or until you can get them the help that they need. So, Tai Yang has bounced the ball off of Yang's emotional wall about her arm. It bounced back, thus signaling to Oobleck and Port that Yang is emotionally ready for this conversation. Yang feels that because she lost her arm, there is no going back to the warrior that she once was. Part of her is lost. But her father argues that you are who you make yourself to be. Even Professor Port chimes in about fear holding you back. Fear is something that can come and go, leading into probably my favorite line this episode.
He's afraid of mice.
They bring only disease and famine! And don't even get me started on their tails.
While the elders in the room manage to bring up Yang's mood in the end, they are not able to convince her to use the arm from ironwood. It is when Yang heads up to bed as Oobleck and Port are leaving, she overhears from her bedroom window as they are going that the only reason that Tai Yang hasn't left to go after RWBY is because he is too busy looking after Yang. This scene is important for something a bit later. Scene number 4, Egon Beta. I'm going to skip the part with the path, not because it's bad or anything, it's just kind of flavor not worth discussing too much, until Qrow shows up. And he has been tailing Team Ranger, making sure that the Grimm stays off their back. While I'm happy to see Qrow again, I'm not really surprised to see him. It was very obvious from the last episode of Volume 3 that he was going to be tailing RWBY and her friends. So this is just confirming that, yeah, he's been there the whole time. When we get to Egon Bena, Ranger checks into their hotel. RWBY, forgetting how many of them there are still on the team, and Qrow is in the tavern across the way. This is such a great transition, not just from one building to another, shifting focus from Team Ranger onto Qrow, but it is also great in shifting the mood from the lighter one that we just had on the path to this darker one that Qrow is about to enter into. And I love this audio transition too. You go from inside the hotel, hearing the rain from the outside, through the window to hearing the rain on the ground, and then inside again, where you hear the rain again from the inside out, on the roof, on the glass. It's such a very nice touch to hear that sound follow the camera. Personally, I get a little bit of a Lord of the Rings vibe watching this, the Fellowship of the Ring to be exact, when the hobbits arrive at the Prancing Pony. Obviously, Crow's Strider. At this point, Qrow is given a drink from the red-eyed lady upstairs, and after some obvious top-shelf flirting from the waitress, he heads up there to find his sister Raven. Now, was he expecting her? Was that her Raven in the scene before, or his Qrow? I'm going to discuss that a little bit later. Now, what do we learn during this conversation with Raven? Well, Raven and Qrow are originally from the same tribe, a sort of bandit nomadic group. They both left together, but eventually Raven went back while Qrow stayed in Patch. Next, we find out that Raven now leads this tribe, but only recently. This is probably the reason why Raven left her family. She probably heard word that the previous leader had died or was dying, and she was next in the line of succession to lead the tribe. Not to mention, being from a nomadic tribe, Raven has probably grown up much of her life always on the move, and now being tied up, or sorry, not now, but back then being tied up as part of a family in this small little island town, probably influenced her to go back out there into the wild as well. Now, really, the only reason she is meeting up with Qrow is to milk him for information on the relic. Yes, the same old relic that Salem was asking about, but mainly she wants to know if Salem has the relic already. So now at least we know that Ozpin's faction was not the only one that knew about Salem or the maidens. And speaking of the maidens, Qrow mentions that Raven must have a heavy hitter on her group, outside of herself or the Grimm, immediately then asking if he had seen the Spring Maiden. This right here is what completely threw me off the idea that the farmer, Oscar, could be the Spring Maiden. No amounts of tinfoil on my hat could bring me back to that now. With this one simple dialogue exchange, my mind has been changed. So that heavy hitter on Raven's team must be the Spring Maiden, but that also means that whatever the relic is, to make Raven so afraid that Salem has it, must be stronger and or negates Maiden's powers for her to be so afraid of it. Because if she has such a powerful ally as a maiden, the Spring Maiden possibly, there's no other reason for her to be afraid of the relic if the relic is not stronger than the maiden. After their talk, Raven cuts open a portal and freaks out the waitress as she leaves, and Qrow orders a double. Before I move on, just a couple of things. First, because Raven travels by portal, I don't think the bird we saw earlier with Qrow was her. He didn't seem to expect her when he was at the bar when he was given the drink, so I'd have to assume that that is either his familiar or possibly hers. Lastly, and this one ties into something that was actually supposed to happen in previous volume, but it never did. It was cut. It was originally planned at one point that Team Juniper was to fight Raven, but it was cut. But now, we know that Raven's tribe are also bandits, and they are possibly the ones that attacked Xiao Long, the same village that Nora, and especially Ren, seem to be rattled over. Ladies and gentlemen, for your theorizing pleasure, Raven and Qrow's tribe killed Ren and Nora's parents and the village that they once lived in, possibly while both Raven and Qrow were still part of the raiding parties. This is what could eventually lead to something that was cut in the previous volume now being built up to something that could happen either this volume or in the future. And I can't wait to see when it does. Scene 5, the Xiao Long's front door. This is a very quick scene with only a few lines, but what is said speaks volumes. Yang comes out with her prosthetic arm on while her father is watering the sunflowers. He sees her and says, "All right, let's get started." Now, what could that mean? Well, 2, possibly 3 things. 1, getting started will be Yang's refresher course. She will need at least a little bit of training to get back into fighting form, not just physically, but mentally too. Overhearing Tai Yang the night before talking to Port and Ubalik may have pushed Yang over the threshold to putting the arm on, but that doesn't mean that she will be able to handle the battlefield just yet. Number 2, obviously the search for RWBY, but this might not happen after the training. They might actually just leave and train on the go, much like Jean is right now. Third, number 3, and this is highly unlikely, but just to cover all the possibilities, they might go to Beacon to help clear out Grimm with Ubalik, Port, and Glinda. This could be a part of her training, could be just like, a small part of an episode before they make their way out to go find RWBY. It's unlikely, but it might still happen. And that's it. Credits roll. But just a couple of things to note before I go. Firstly, I have a major complaint. All of these scenes at the Xiao Long home, and we did not get one scene with Zwei in it. They had ample corgi opportunities, and it was just squandered. Okay, real production note. If you watch the credits, you will see that the farmer Oscar is voiced by Aaron Dismuke, aka Alphonse Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. Now we have both brothers, Ed and Al, and I'd really love to see Oscar and Qrow in a scene together with maybe some sort of joke between them where somebody like Qrow says to Oscar, maybe you should wear armor, or maybe Oscar saying to Qrow, that's a nice scythe. It must have cost you an arm and a leg. I don't care how corny it is. Even have Yang say it while those two are together. It would make me so happy. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you all for watching. If there is something I missed or anything you would like to add, feel free to add a comment below. Also, if you enjoyed my ramblings, please like, subscribe, and even share with your friends. And until next time, good night, everybody!